African business leaders, officials of development finance institutions, and members of African Union countries recently committed to join forces to create and support a funding mechanism to deal with the Ebola outbreak and its consequences. Business leaders committed over $28 million as an emergency fund during an African Business Roundtable Summit on Ebola held in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Observers say the last decade had seen dramatic increases in donor funding for global health. However, recipients are often confronted with some challenges, including delay in accessing the funds. Joining us in the studio for more on the subject is Aaron Betru, Managing Director of Pledge Guarantee for Health, a financing partnership designed to increase the speed and efficiency of funding from international donors for health commodities. Mr. Betru, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So we see a lot about donors pledging money when there is a health crisis. Emergency funds are being put in place, but often people on the ground complain, where is the money? We don't have the resources. How does this work, really? Can you explain to us?
Thank you. To be honest with you, I think you're hitting it right on the head, that it's not necessarily just the amount of money that we make pledges, but actually how fast we move them. I think the best way to explain it is to tell you a quick short story. In 2011, we had a situation where in Zambia, they were waiting on a $5 million pledge from the World Bank. And this money was going to go specifically for the purchase of malaria bed nets for an impending rainy season that they were going to have. But the issue that was faced was the timing between when the pledges were made or even when the grants were agreed upon to the time that they were going to be in the hands of the procurement agents to buy the bed nets and deliver them in time was going to be 8 to 10 months. Now, here's a perfect situation where why should we be waiting?
Yes, indeed. Indeed. So why should we be waiting? How can we accelerate this process? And perhaps that's where you come in.
Absolutely. And so what we ended up doing in cooperation with the UN Special Envoy for Innovative Financing, as well as the World Bank and UNICEF, we provided what is normal in the private sector. We provided a financial guarantee to Standard Bank of South Africa. Standard Bank of South Africa opened up a line of credit for the Ministry of Health, and the nets were procured and started rolling in within 3 weeks. It's a simple process. It's not, even though we call it in our world innovative financing, but effectively it's a credit card that allows us to move rapidly to the needs in the country today and just avoid all the pitfalls around the slow response time that's typical in this industry.
Are there some fees associated with this?
Yes, there are some interest expenses that are associated with this, but what we try to do is work with the private sector, work with either the commercial banks to lower their fees, work with the suppliers to actually absorb the cost of the financing. And in every single case, we've actually been able to make the costs completely negligible. And we have to think about the actual cost on the other side of it, of not acting, of not moving fast.
Yes.
Forget about the number of lives saved, which is paramount. But there's also all the inefficiencies that we get from just inefficient uses of aid, from switching from sea freighting to air freighting, all these different things.
And sometimes corruption. People talk about,
absolutely.
You know, it's one of the issues, but not the only thing.
No, absolutely. How you account for that money and how you use it. Now, when you're bringing in all the private sector in the special places that we do, at the end of the day, you get better governance and better oversight as well as rapid response and recouping all that inefficient use of the money.
What have you observed with the Ebola crisis specifically?
I think one of the things we can easily point to is I think the UN Special Envoy recently identified that, yes, the need that was originally calculated by OSHA was about $1 billion. Looks like it's actually going to be an extra $500 million going through to the next year. And of that, the trust fund that has been set up, only about 120 commitments and pledges have been placed, but of that, only 13 million has actually arrived and 8 million actually deployed. See how quickly we've gone from 1.5 billion to just 8 million on the ground.
That's mind-boggling. We hear these big numbers, and then at the end of the day, either it doesn't get there quickly enough, but how do people take advantage of your program? Are countries or NGOs aware of what is being put in place here?
So recently, the US government and the Swedish government banded together to support the creation of a $100 million guarantee fund, where we took that and partnered with some private sector players like EcoBank and Calvert Foundation to create a $100 million rapid response fund, which basically means when you've got pledges in hand and you actually need to move faster, we'll place a financial guarantee with these financing partners that will turn on the capital as quickly as possible so you can have the money to buy these temporary health centers or mobile hospital units and move them into the facility very quickly. I think there was an article written recently at the New York Times, I think yesterday or the day before, where the UN envoy, Dr. Nabarro, said, you know, we need to shift away from building these 100+ large mega centers in places like in Monrovia, where the spread has flatlined a little bit, and have these fast response ones that can go into places like Sierra Leone, where the rates are increasing.
Okay, we have to leave it there, unfortunately. Mr. Betru, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And that was Aaron Betru. He is Managing Director of Pledge Guarantee for Health.